All right, welcome to Beyond Parody, a Not the Bee podcast. My name is Dan Dillon. I am the CEO and co-founder of Not the Bee, and I am joined by our usual panel today, Robin Garfield, who is the host of the Top 3 from Not the Bee podcast.
Woohoo!
And we have Joel Abbott, our editor-in-chief.
I am here.
And we have Mr. B, who appears on screen as a Not the Bee logo.
You may not see me, but trust me, I am here.
We should have the little bee animate when you talk. I think it would be exciting for the viewers.
I'll work on that.
Add like a little mouth onto it.
Yeah. And speaking of the viewers, this is our first podcast that we are also recording. We're not 100% sure we will actually put the recorded video up because we're kind of working through all of the technical details there. But soon you should be able to find the podcast on YouTube and other places that you watch podcasts, Rumble and things like that. So that's exciting news coming up. And as far as news is concerned, we had some pretty big news stories this week, as usual, that we can talk about, but we also had a lot of really funny ones. And I think we'll focus more on the little ones this week because there was just a ton of stuff that we can kind of go through really quickly. But I think that the big stories this week headlining were the Delta plane crash, right?
Yes.
I don't know who in the audience knows or doesn't know, but I am actually currently training to get my pilot's license. It's just kind of a lifelong dream of mine. I was an aerospace engineer, and I've worked in the aerospace industry for a large portion of my professional life. And most of my friends ended up getting pilot's licenses, and I didn't. And I was just like, well, I need to do that. And so I've been going through the training process right now. I'm about 3/4 of the way through just to get my private pilot's license, and now I'm seeing all these plane crashes. And people are like, well, does that make you really nervous? And, I don't think there's fundamentally anything that's changed with the physics of flying, but it is a little bit crazy that we've had this just inrush of major commercial and private plane crashes. This one, it is absolutely remarkable that there were no immediate fatalities. I mean, this plane came down and hit so hard and basically erupted into a fireball, which even if the impact hadn't hurt anybody, that just the fact that everybody avoided any type of explosion or any type of force that would cause them to have died just on impact. Then it flipped upside down, went down the runway, and everybody was able to get off before the entire plane was engulfed in flames or people were smoked out or anything like that. So Joel, what do you think happened here? Is this a DEI equals DIE type of a situation or what?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of rumors out there. I will just say praise the Lord, because when you are watching that video, especially there was a video taken by another pilot who was holding on a separate runway, and you just see that thing come down, and it hit very hard. When it landed, it seemed like it was coming in at a way higher rate of speed. I don't know exactly what was going on with calculations. People were blaming some of the snowstorms we were having. I'm in Michigan. Toronto's not too far from me. And you just watch that thing, and yeah, it hits, it flips, fireball. You're thinking everybody's toast, and then you see them all getting off of the thing.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, it's worth noting. People were looking at the company that operated this flight, which is called Endeavor Air. They brag on social media all the time about having all female flight crews. It's a slay queen, girl boss utopia. And we also know that the first officer was a woman, or we believe, at least from what people have looked through, that it's a woman who just received her qualifications for flying a plane of this type. So there really is a giant question mark there, and Delta's been awfully silent about the particulars.
Yeah, it's crazy to watch the video. It's something that the fuel of nightmares is made of, to see it come in so fast that where the landing gear just snaps off and then erupts in this giant flame ball. It looked like, not to minimalize it, but it looked like the ending scene of the movie Airplane, where it just lands. Like, it looked like a model to me, like something from like an old time.
Yeah, it was like a toy plane.
Like a toy plane. And then to see everybody getting off. I will say my take, I guess, on the DEI, is she a woman? The Free Press, I don't know if anybody reads the Free Press here, Barry Weiss's outlet. It's got some phenomenal reporting, but they put out an article last week that said, remember, Republicans, any minority hire is not a DEI hire. And I do think it is, if it comes out that it was a female pilot and she was highly inexperienced and she was promoted over her male counterparts because she was a woman, then yeah, absolutely, that's DEI, that's nonsense. But I think that this knee-jerk, like, well, it must have been a woman and she must have been a terrible pilot. There are many, many phenomenal female pilots. And I do hope that as we upend some of these systems that have been in place, that we do remember that any minority in a position of any sort of authority or employment role isn't just a DEI hire by virtue of the fact that they're a minority.
The danger of DEI, though, not just the danger, but I guess the way that it actually reinforces stereotypes and I don't, racism, sexism, whatever, is the fact that you're right. There are wonderfully talented female pilots. I've met several of them that I would trust them with my life 100%. Going through school, I went to Embry-Riddle and I knew a lot of them, and they've had amazing careers, and they're not just crashing planes left and right. The problem with DEI is the fact that when you do see a woman pilot, or especially an all-woman piloting crew, you now have to wonder whether or not that person is there because of merit, or if that person is there because they are part of a DEI program. So when you're going on an airline that actively celebrates DEI programs, you have to assume that probably if it is a woman pilot, she is there for the wrong reasons, unfortunately, because they're all about that, like giving opportunities to people who have a specific skin color or a specific gender or whatever that it is, rather than putting the person in there to pilot the plane that's the most qualified to pilot the plane for that particular route and on that particular plane. That's the danger of DEI. It doesn't mean that women can't be good pilots. It doesn't mean that only white males should be piloting. But the thing with a white male is that when you see a white male, because DEI programs exist as a pilot, when you walk into your plane, you see a white male, you know that he's definitely there for the right reasons because he's having to fight. He's got to be super qualified to do it, because otherwise you wouldn't get the job, because they're looking for other people that are minorities or women to fill that role. And they were hoping they could find somebody, but they couldn't find somebody that was more qualified than him. Like that's how it reinforces sexism. Right. That's how it reinforces racism.
Right.
And
I agree.
That's the horrible danger of DEI, right?
Isn't it ironic that anti-racism, so-called anti-racism, made everything more racist?
Yeah,
I mean, truly,
I
horrible.
wouldn't have used to have thought about that.
Nope.
Honestly, with a female pilot, like, I flew through the late 80s and the early 90s and things like that, when DEI itself wasn't so much of a thing. And people didn't used to think about it the way that they do now. And now you're more skeptical. We supposedly made all this progress, quote unquote, right, in our society. But I'm way more skeptical of those types of hires now than I used to be, because of the fact that they are legitimately throwing out merit. They don't want merit. They just want to fill the seats with people of specific genders or skin colors.
Well, it's interesting. We were watching family videos last week. My dad's 86, but he was a Delta pilot, Western then Delta. And we were watching a video he took in 1985, and he's filming the cockpit, and it's him and an all-female crew. He's the captain, but he's got a female first officer, a female navigator, and he's like going through. And it was so cool to see these ladies in the 80s. And I thought, wow, these ladies must have been super hyper qualified to have risen up in the ranks. And it was an international flight. It was a pretty big deal at the time. And you're right. We've now flipped that, where you see a video of all female flight crew, and it is your knee-jerk reaction, which is founded in all of this DEI stuff, that they probably are underqualified, which is sad.
It is sad. And my daughters are interested in flying, and I have 3 of them. And it sucks, because I 100% believe that they're capable of doing everything that I'm capable of doing as a pilot. It doesn't require a specific type of upper body strength. It does require certain type of analytical thinking, and it does require spatial awareness. And those are things that typically we've come to learn that males typically do excel at those things more than females do. Believe it or not, listeners, there are differences between sexes, right? And
We're going to get canceled.
That does not mean that a woman cannot be as good as a male at those things. It just means that in general, those are the types of things that you associate with males. But I feel bad for my daughters because, if they get these positions, first of all, I wouldn't want my daughter's safety to be at risk, that they're going to be given their private pilot's license before they're really ready for it, because these schools are trying to pump out as many female pilots as possible, right? I know that when I go there, and get the instruction that I need, they're going to push me until I'm ready, and they don't care about really me graduating. But my daughters, if they go to school for that type of a thing, I will be concerned about whether or not they're really getting a full education or if they're being pushed through to satisfy some type of quota, which is why Doge and Trump and Elon and all the things that they're trying to do to kind of rewrite the definitions of things and what we can and can't do, and actually enforce the laws to make sure that people aren't given preferential treatment based upon their sex or their race. That those things are important for our society to function properly and for us to not be racist.
I've never heard a really good argument against meritocracy other than something racist, something sexist, something. But when you take out all the nonsense, I just can't. I have not heard, and I'd be open to hearing a really good faith argument against just pure meritocracy and the way that it promotes people through effort and skill rather than identity politics or personal identity, whatever it is. And if someone has a good argument out there and wants to debate me, I would love to have one about the benefits of affirmative action or the benefits of DEI and how it creates. All I ever hear is it creates a more inclusive, a more diverse society, which is fine. But I want a more functional, qualified society.
There's the idea. Sorry, Joel. I was just going to say, there's the idea that diversity and representation creates an environment in which more people that look like those people will want to go into those fields and become highly merited pilots or whatever. And to a certain extent, there might be a little bit of validity to that. I mean, if women just assume that there's no women pilots because they don't see any women pilots and they're not interested in becoming women pilots, so you won't have any equally qualified women pilots, right? So I definitely see that aspect of it you can make an argument about that, right? About, representation is important for that reason, is because it's going to bring more people into that field. But other than that, no, I don't think that there is really an argument. But Joel, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, it's funny that we always have to have this conversation, but then whenever the right side of the political aisle does actually have somebody that could be touted as a quote unquote diversity hire, the left absolutely loses their mind. So I'm just thinking about Kash Patel, he's an Indian American. He's also super highly qualified, and it's now the end of the world that he's being appointed to lead the FBI. And so you see, it's weird because we have this whole conversation about people flying airplanes and DEI, and then we actually have somebody who is, according to the left standards, diverse, accomplished, well-liked, respected within many circles. It's just that he doesn't agree with their presuppositions, and so he's outside of the fold. So all the DEI stuff gets thrown right out the window, and they hate him and they say that he's basically a Nazi. And so it's the cognitive dissonance that's there that really gets me.
Can we just hire the most qualified person who cares about race, sex, politics? And as a side note, Dan, as a white male pilot, I saw Dan take off and land 3 or 4 days ago, and it was the smoothest I've ever seen.
Thanks, P.
There you go. I agree that with the Kash Patel hearings, I don't even know if the left care. I haven't heard much of them saying they don't like him because he's an Indian or from India. But I feel like they're just going to dislike anybody. I saw this crazy exchange this week online where someone said Trump has the least diverse cabinet of any president ever. And someone said his chief of staff is a woman, his press secretary is a woman. He's got an Indian running this. And I know it's glib to say Elon Musk is an African-American, but he's not from the US. And Trump has put a lot of women in his cabinet, but you're right, Joel, it's the wrong kind of diversity. And for whatever reason, the right just can't get it right when the left is concerned. as far as it has to be oppressed, whatever, it doesn't check all these boxes. But the Kash Patel hearings were really interesting, and reading what my own representatives from Utah were saying online, what their concerns were. I think it's good to be skeptical of anybody we're going to put in the government. And I'm not a team player as far as, if he's got an R by his name, put him in. I will be skeptical. Same with RFK. I've mentioned on the show before. I am skeptical about his appointment, and I am going to be watching him. And if I were a senator, I would have asked some very pointed questions, regardless of wherever he came from. And Kash Patel has an interesting background, and I'm excited. My take on his appointment, and I don't know if this is this. I've been talking about this with a lot of people this week. I am very skeptical if anything will change at the FBI. It's just too big of a golden ring. No one's going to toss that thing into the fires of Mount Doom.
If something was going to change at the FBI, it would be now. It
has to happen quickly. If it doesn't happen quickly, yeah.
So this is the only opportunity
coming out.
But see, you're thinking, Robin, in with logic, with compassion, with nuance. These are things of the left. They're not processing things like that. When we ran an article about people over on Blue Sky reacting to his confirmation. And these people literally think that they are going to die. They're asking about firing squads. They think that leftists are going to be sent to Gitmo. They're talking about, I'm looking at a few of these quotes here. People are saying, we're not going to make it, are we? Somebody says, I need some antacid. I'm legit nauseated over this. Another person is saying, wait a month until you suddenly find yourself looking around in a restaurant to make sure no one overhears what you're saying. Or when your conversations with neighbors dwindle to pleasantries about the weather. It's only just begun.
Welcome to being a Republican for the last 10 years. You gotta turn down Ben Shapiro in the car when you're picking up from elementary school.
Right. You have to be careful. But these people, they're sitting there. One woman actually said, get ready for a truly weaponized justice system, because that hasn't existed at all. Totally. It's been perfect. It's been neutral. The past, 10, 15 years in American life, there's been absolutely no polarity when it comes to the FBI or the DOJ. And it makes me laugh. They're not thinking. I would look at somebody that the left proposed, if this was Joe Biden's second term or Kamala's term, and they had proposed somebody, I would actually look at their qualifications and say, okay, are they going to be able to do this? If you look at Kash Patel's qualifications, he's very highly qualified to be in this position. And yet the left doesn't look at that. They look at him. He's associated with Trump. Trump equals Hitler. Therefore, we're all going to die. And it really does boggle my mind sometimes. I try to understand their thought process, but it's maddening when you dive into it.
It is absolutely. But they're consistent. At least they're rejecting meritocracy, right? They're consistent in that sense. Now, those are two of the biggest news stories of the week. But I think that the number 3 would be. Actually, I have to warn you guys before I play this. This is the audio clip of the week. I've got to bring this up right now. I got to bring it on. You guys might want to cover your ears, because this is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. It's got to be the worst public singing I've ever heard before.
Dan, please sing along.
I might afterwards. I'll give it, or at least I'll try to emulate exactly how bad it was that they sang. But listen to this. This is a bunch of Democrats singing. What is the exact context for this? I forget exactly what the event was that they were singing about. Was it just the Elon stuff? Was it just Doge? Was that all it was? I don't remember.
Doge, yeah, overreach.
They're just protesting in general Elon Musk and Doge overreach, and this is their song that they were singing. It's great.
Which side are you on? We'll fight against Doge. We'll fight Elon Musk. No Elon's kept within our walls. We'll fight from dawn to dusk. Oh, which side are you on?
All right, I'll emulate it. Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Gotta be really off key.
Number 1, Joel, you're a great dancer. Number 2, I'm going to try and auto-tune that post.
That should be our intro, actually, for the show. Which side are you on?
I love that.
Oh my gosh,
that's the best. She got some pretty low too. She had some talent. that audio clip, when I heard that the first time, I love the comments too. You just go down at music teachers. You have an emerging new market in DC. They always seem to be available to complain during work hours.
Scott Jennings over on CNN said, "We may never lose again." The conservative commentator on CNN.
And that is a campaign ad for the 2026 midterms.
Pretty crazy. They all had the same day off. I love that. That's great.
The other, did you see the one that they were protesting Trump taking over the Kennedy Center, which is probably the funniest. That's so funny. But they were doing this dance where they were all walking in a circle. But it was just like flapping their arms. It was this like interpretive dance. There was probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 dozen people in this line just flapping. I'm like, that's the best dance you could come up with. It's just arms up, arms down. And if you want to talk
some of these
about
people are just not.
But NPR was glowing. They gave them a glowing review. They had a whole article. They had a whole radio segment talking about how they are fighting the power through dance. And yeah, you're right. They're literally just walking along.
Yeah, I can do that. I'm not a dancer, but man, I could totally get into that. Arms up, arms down, wax on, wax off.
Joel, when you do that with the clouds in the background, it looks like you're flying.
I am. I'm flying to heaven.
I think that it's important that we try to make this a video episode because some of the stuff that's happening on set right now needs to be seen. Anyway, now we're going to go through quick fire a little bit. We're going to go through a list of a couple of news articles that really stood out this week as just like ridiculous or funny. We just spend a second on each one of them instead of kind of going into these long diatribes as we're known to do. But this is just insane. There's no world in which a justification for this exists, but California school district informs parents that tampons will be placed in 3rd grade boys' restrooms.
Inclusive progress.
Let them have it. California is just going to keep leading people.
I mean, generally menstruation happens in 3rd grade, right?
Yeah, what's the 8? That's like 8 or 9. Well, 7 or 8. It's ridiculous.
3rd grade is like 7, I think.
7.
That's beyond all of the outliers of where you need to have these things available. And also, it's the boys. It's like, if it wasn't beyond all the outliers of when it happens for females, it's also being put in the boys' restroom. Okay,
the number of pranks that are about to be had in those schools. My goodness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What happened here? I actually didn't even see this. I saw the headlines about it, but I didn't watch it. So what happened with Mark Hamill's pants falling down?
Oh, it's sad. It's a sad video.
You mean
gay Luke Skywalker?
That's his name now.
I had a hard time watching that one. He is. It's sad to see someone have a really embarrassing moment. I know, even if he's a little bit of a tool now politically. I don't know, Joel. You probably thought it was revenge.
What, did he not have a belt?
He was probably given clothes to wear there, or I don't know. I don't know if he brought his own clothes or if they had kind of a standard uniform for the people that were up there presenting. I didn't watch the whole thing, but his pants, something happened, and he was standing up there at the podium, and he just started shuffling kind of awkwardly, and his pants had dropped down close to his knees, like at least a few inches. So he was pulling them back up. And look, I don't like to laugh at Mark Hamill. I love Star Wars, or at least I used to love Star Wars. I love old Star Wars. This is Luke Skywalker we're talking about, but it was kind of funny. I mean, this is a guy who spent the last few years really becoming political, and then he goes up there and kind of clowns himself. I'm going to laugh at the joke. But I mean, I do feel bad for him. It is Luke Skywalker. So
I have a theory on it, actually.
Oh,
have you guys seen the movie Police Academy?
Yes.
You remember Commandant Lassard when he approaches the podium?
I mean, I don't remember.
I'm trying to remember
things about the movie, but I have seen it.
I'll leave it at that.
I don't know.
Listeners.
Everyone has to go watch the movie now.
I don't know about that.
All right. So the next one, which I think, Robin, this one tickled your fancy a little bit, but the video of the German doctor teaching his colleagues how to fight off knife attackers with towels.
It's like something from a Monty Python sketch almost. I'm going to come at you with this knife. You grab a bath towel or a hand towel. I'm going to teach you who has a towel. And in the moment of getting lunged at with a knife, it's like, aha, I'm going to defend you off.
This is very
It's just a flesh wound.
Jason Bourne.
Just a flesh wound. Yeah,
it's very specific for when you're attacked with a knife in a bathroom setting. in a home bathroom setting with a shower or a bath in it. So basically, the lady from Psycho, she could have used this.
She could have used that towel. I don't know. That was a sneak attack. We didn't talk about sneak attacks. The video is literally they're coming at you from the front.
They have alerted you that they're going to be coming at you, and they've given you time to prepare by grabbing a towel.
And the next lesson, how to fight off birds by getting inside a telephone booth.
There you go. Another Hitchcock reference. I like it. What happened here? I was a little bit out of the news this week as far as the smaller news stories are concerned. I've been distracted doing a lot of travel this past week. But what happened with a lady who lost 2 hands taking a selfie with a shark?
That was brutal. Can you imagine? So there was this Canadian woman, 55 years old, and where was she at? It was Turks and Caicos, and she was down there. She saw either a tiger or a bull shark about 6 feet long in the water. She actually ran toward the shark with her phone, I imagine her phone outstretched, to try to get closer to it, and it just saw her, probably thought she was a tasty-looking sea turtle or something like that. Normally when tiger sharks are hunting in those shallower waters, a lot of time, that's their natural prey. So it just lashed out, bit off both of her hands, and one of her arms had to be amputated at the elbow. And so now she doesn't have any hands. And she was there with her husband. So her husband's pulling her out of the water. People are there. There's pictures. It's absolutely horrific. I just don't know why you would see a tiger shark and then run into the water. Did she think it was a dolphin? I have no clue. I want to give her the benefit of the doubt. But to me, that's one of the craziest things I've ever heard of in our modern selfie era.
Yeah, that is...
Joel, you win the quote of the week, a tasty-looking sea turtle.
Tasty-looking sea turtle.
Did she actually get her hands, the details sometimes in this are a little bit grotesque, but did she actually get her hands bitten off, or were they mauled bad enough that they had to be amputated?
I think both. I believe that they actually, her hands were missing when she came up, and they had to amputate at the wrist. It's not a clean cut, obviously.
There's just some arteries going through there, man. It's like... That's crazy that she was
the pictures were all blurred, but you could tell people were compressing towels. It was again, it's like nothing to laugh at. The thing that's just insane is that she did this of her own volition. This wasn't just some random attack. This was somebody that thought, ooh, I have a selfie opportunity with a shark. I just don't know what has to go through somebody's mind for that to be your first instinct.
Yeah, it's like we've had the two things I fear most this week in the news: a horrific plane crash that I guess will get out of alive, but the video, and then getting bit by a shark in open water. These are two things if you were to put on my radar, I would say. If you add a snake attack to that, then you just cover the trifecta for me. But yeah, I don't know. I go online and Google shark. If you want a picture of a shark, just go shark pic, and then you have one. There's a million of them out there. You don't need to take your own. You just don't need to get close.
Or go where you're in a cage, or you have some shark mail on, you're with some people. Yeah. But the local authorities said that she, quote, attempted to engage with the shark.
No, don't engage a shark. That's a children's book. Do not engage the shark.
All right. So one more serious topic before we get into the questions of the week from Mr. B. And this is something I think that it's important that the media, including ourselves, cover as much as possible, because it seems like it's being forgotten. But can you tell me, Joel, why it is that you think that the media is not talking about the 70 Christians that were just beheaded in the Congo?
Yeah, it's amazing how they're so quiet. If there's a hate crime, like in Florida, there was some teenager, young guy that did a burnout on a gay pride crosswalk. So that was a national news story. Dozens of major outlets were talking about it. You had time on MSNBC, CNN. Everybody's talking about it. Somebody did a burnout on this rainbow crosswalk. That's very important because it's a hate crime. We need to talk about these things because these people are marginalized and oppressed, and we need to root out hate. But then 70 Christians get beheaded. This is just one incident. There's been several this month in Congo alone, where we're in the double digits of Christians that have been killed, and absolutely nothing. So really, it's just that they don't care. They just absolutely don't care. They know that it's not. They don't think it's going to get clicks. It's not part of an agenda. It's not part of a narrative. The pictures are absolutely horrific because these terrorists released photos of themselves burning and beheading people. Right. But there were outlets. Newsweek was the only one that covered it outside of the conservative Christian news sphere. And then you had Hungary Today, and we had, Modern Tokyo Times covered it. And outside of that, nobody. These people just don't matter.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a built-in outrage machine that they can take advantage of,
Right.
because for whatever reason, when Christians do hear stories like this, they don't react the same way that other, what you would call minority groups or protected groups or whatever you want to call them, would react when some of their kind were harmed, which is really sad from the standpoint of modern Christianity, I think, and also shows you that even if the media isn't just simply not covering it because they are Christians, they're at least not covering it because there's no outrage machine. And if there's no outrage machine, there's no virality. And if there's no virality, there's no money, right?
Yeah.
So that's like the best case, defense for them, is just that there's no money in publishing an article like that. But it goes beyond that, because there's a lot of articles that they publish, that aren't necessarily made to be viral articles. So I think that it's even more devious than that. I think that it is focused specifically on, we aren't going to try to humanize Christians, kind of, we're not going to try, we're going to go out of our way to not cover things that expose that these are real people that are suffering from similar types of, hardships that other people suffer from.
Well, it's that hierarchy of oppression. If you've heard of, that model, and people talk about it. It's not just something that we talk about as a criticism. People like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo talk about these. They platform these hierarchies of oppression in a legitimate way, and white Christians or whoever are not anywhere near the top of that hierarchy, and so who cares? Is the narrative, and that's been now trickled down throughout culture, throughout news. It's on some small level a little bit like what we saw this week with the release of the bodies of the hostages in Hamas.
Oh,
it has received some news coverage for sure, but the outrage from the people who are outraged at, like Joel said, a few tread marks on a rainbow crosswalk, are not talking about the fact that Hamas murdered a mother and her babies.
And then celebrated it in the middle of the streets.
Celebrated it in a parade. And
if you're trying to come across as the good guys, that is not the way to do it, right?
Oh, yeah, it's really just disillusioning.
If you find yourself on the side that is celebrating any death, and that's the thing, is like, I had referenced this even on Twitter this week. It's like, for whatever reason, people have, made a lot of accusations against my brother and against the Babylon Bee and not the Bee, of being Zionists and being, funded by, the cabal, the Jewish cabal, or whatever it is, and all this other stuff. And it's like, and they're like, well, why won't you say anything negative about Israel and Palestine? I honestly, I don't get that involved in those discussions, because there's a lot of geopolitics that I don't understand enough to really come out and say. But what I do know is that if Israel killed somebody, Hamas, or just a citizen of Gaza, and put them in a coffin and then paraded them down the street celebrating,
and
you know how strongly I would condemn that? I would condemn it the same as I'm going to condemn this. Yeah. And it doesn't have anything to do with Israel. It doesn't have anything to do with Gaza or Palestine. This is humanity. And nobody that does that against even their worst enemies that have harmed them, to a child's body being carried in a coffin and celebrating like that, it's pure evil. It doesn't matter which side is doing it. And I do think, that both sides have done things that are not great to each other. But I only see one side celebrating the deaths of babies. That's I guess where I draw the line. And it's like, if you find yourself on the side that's celebrating the deaths of babies, and you're probably not on the right side. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to go gung ho for the other side and be huge supporters and say everything the other side does is justified. But at the very least, you shouldn't be celebrating the deaths of babies.
No. It goes back to what we were talking about with DEI in the first story. There's a worldview at play here. Our definitions of good and evil are actually different. On the left, they get very outraged against what they think is evil. It's just that it's totally different. They see Christian civilization, Western civilization, as an oppressor. And so those, like you said, Robin, there's that whole intersectional hierarchy. The Christian, the colonizers, the West, they are the evil ones. They're the bigoted ones. They're the racist ones. They invented slavery, don't you know? All of these things. And that's the narrative. And then you have the oppressed people who are, you know, the gays and also Hamas, the radical Muslims. And those two are somehow allied together in the leftist mind on the side of good. And so it's not really good versus evil based on your actions. Good and evil are defined by and through oppression, who is oppressed and who is oppressing someone else. And so it's not about your individual behavior. If I go out and shoot somebody in the back of the head, like that Luigi, what's his name, who killed the healthcare CEO, the left celebrates that because the healthcare CEO was oppressing people. So therefore there's justification, and you're not actually looking at it through it's our definitions of good and evil are actually totally different.
But here's the crazy thing, Joel. Fire a couple hundred IRS employees and you kick up a beehive on the left, shoot a CEO in the head, you're a hero. I just don't understand. There's no consistency.
Right. It doesn't make, you're right. It doesn't make any sense, but that's because good is good and evil is evil. And when you try to redefine it like the left has done, you end up getting these competing, you know, dissonant things.
And it's, you know, I know it's kind of beaten. This topic has been discussed quite a bit, but the hypocrisy is obvious when you look at the fact that they are defending Muslims, right? Because Muslims, the only reason they're defending Muslims is because Muslims don't like Christians, and they also don't like Christians. So when you're liberal and you support Muslims, what you're really doing is you're supporting the enemies of Christians. But you can't support Islam if you're a liberal who doesn't like people putting tire marks on gay pride crosswalks or whatever. Right. And then say that you support all these innocent Muslims that are being, you know, harmed by Israel and things like that. It doesn't make
Palestinian flag, a rainbow.
Queers for Hamas, queers for Palestine.
It shows such a lack of literacy on the topic. I am not the smartest person in the world on foreign policy, but I did take 2 years. I was in the Middle Eastern Studies program for 2 years at BYU. I took 2 years of Arabic. I used to be relatively fluent in Arabic and have a lot of friends. I have friends from Palestine. I have friends from Libya, from Syria. And now I have a lot of friends in the Jewish community. And so I can speak with...
Now that you work for the Babylon Bee, you have tons of friends in the Jewish community.
But yeah, I guess
we can both speak Arabic, and Dan doesn't know what we're talking about.
But I wouldn't purport to be an expert on the Middle East. But when I see people defending Hamas and in the same breath trying to be some sort of LGBTQ ally, I just think you reached into a bucket and picked up this handful of identities, and you're going to wear these, and none of them make any sense together. And somehow we've turned the hijab into a symbol of feminism, and all of these different issues that I'm a lurker on Twitter. I never, ever, ever comment. I just don't have the time or energy to engage in discussions with people I don't know, let alone people I do know. But to see the amount of ignorance on the topic, people think that Israel just plopped down in the middle of the territory and whenever on October 7th. I don't know what people think, but there's just no context for any of it. And it's just disillusioning to see how much power we've given this cohort of people who are still out there screaming and yelling and shutting down freeways and disrupting life based on completely erroneous prior opinions. That's my soapbox.
Nice.
I think the good, just, you know, going back to the Christians who were killed, the thing is a lot of these leftist groups, they have to have justice in this life. They don't really necessarily believe in a afterlife in heaven. They feel like they need to enact justice right now. And the good thing, I just think of, every time I see these stories, I think about Hebrews 11, where the writer of Hebrews is talking about all the people who were killed, you know, those who through faith conquered kingdoms, but they were put to death by stoning, sawed in two, killed by the sword. And I think about that and I go, you know, even though CNN won't cover it, even though NBC News won't cover it, like, these people are with God in heaven, and they have their reward, and CNN has their reward. And these Christians who died in Congo have a much greater eternal reward than anyone on the left by withholding information and trying to control the narrative. Like, that's the reward that the left gets, is whatever they're trying to do right now in the here and now. So I don't know. That's my little spiritual plug. I think as I'm writing these stories, it's why it doesn't get me down, because I come across so many of these and it's so easy to get angry, but I don't, anger is not my first response, because there is a sense of rejoicing with brothers and sisters who are now with God, even as I'm mourning that they're no longer here. Like, obviously it's devastating and we want to fight for justice in this life, but, whenever we're writing and publishing these stories, I always think about that.
My reward is knowing I'm right now too.
That's Robin's reward. She knows she's right now.
I look at conversations online and like, you're wrong. That's fine. But you're right. I mean, it does have consequences, really dire consequences. But every time I try to engage with anybody on these topics that are strongly opinionated,
yeah,
I just like, I'm right. You're wrong. So that's my reward.
You're right if you're not agreeing with the side that is parading around and celebrating baby deaths. How about that?
It's pretty easy.
All right, Mr. B, you have something for us? You got some questions?
Well, since we're traditionalists here at Not the Bee, I'm going to travel back into the 50s and say ladies first, if that's okay.
I think that should be 2025.
I agree. And it appears you are in your bedroom, Robin, so I am going to ask you this question. What is the weirdest dream you ever had?
That could have gone somewhere else.
I was
just waiting there.
That's what I do.
I was just, okay, dreams. I could talk about dreams. That's I've had a lot weird or poignant. I actually am a big believer in the significance of dreams, not on like a map. I would never tell someone like, oh, you had a dream about that, like go act on that. But for me personally, I write down a lot of my dreams. I had a nightmare when I was like 5 years old. It's one of my earliest memories. And it's something that really affected me for a long time. I just had a dream when I was a little, like, this was in the 1980s, where this like dead body was coming out of a floor and grabbed me and was like trying to pull me down in this hole of my house. I know you said weird. I'm going terrifying. I've had a lot of nightmares. That's kind of something I've dealt with, night terrors. I wake up a lot, even still, with really vivid, very active dreams. And so my kids last week, we were talking about being scared of the dark, because I have a kid who has a hard time going to bed. And I'm like, oh yeah, when I was way younger than you, I had this nightmare and I had to deal with it for years. It kind of kept coming back. And I still remember it. It's like my earliest memory. It's just this, I was a little kid. I remember waking up and running into my parents' room, and it's something that's stuck around with me forever. Last week, my husband made me watch a movie that I hated with all my heart. And I have had waking nightmares all week about it. And I'm so mad at him that he would have me watch this movie. I'm just very influenced by visual things, and they pop up in my dreams a lot. So
now I need to know what movie that was.
It's the movie with Hugh Grant called Heretic. And a lot of people loved it, and I love horror movies. Horror movies is my favorite.
Hugh
genre.
Grant isn't.
I'm the total opposite.
You don't like horror, Joel?
No, absolutely not.
But this one wasn't. This was about Mormon missionaries, female missionaries in near the area where I served my mission, and it just hit way too close to home.
I was going to say, if it's hitting really close to home. I can see why that would be terrifying. It was
like the thing I did, minus getting kidnapped by Hugh Grant, but the knocking on random people's doors, the going in homes, the getting in these really deep theological debates with people who are always trying to corner you, and all week I've been like having these horrible nightmares from this.
I thought you were going to say, once you said Hugh Grant, I thought you were going to say the horror movie that you watched was Bridget Jones's Diary.
Oh, I love that movie. That's like my top 10.
Hugh Grant. That reminds me of, you can make any movie trailer into a horror movie trailer, kind of like somebody redid Mrs. Doubtfire. He's a creepy stalker.
And you change the music in the background.
You change the music and a little bit of different lighting.
For me personally, putting on a normal Hugh Grant movie, that is a horror movie for me too. I've got to find a way to get out of the room as soon as possible. All
Dan,
right.
I thought you loved Notting Hill, though.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Dan, here we go. If you could travel back in time to one moment and give yourself advice, what would it be?
I mean, that's pretty easy. I'd just travel back about 10 years and just say, buy Bitcoin. Next.
Okay. Actually, here's a trivia question for you, Dan. you and I have spent some time together the past couple weeks, and we have a new name for Robin. What is it?
Atomic Buff. She loves atomic war. She loves nuclear war.
I was worried where that was going too.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Joel wasn't on that. I think wasn't on that
if
episode.
it was last week, I was not here. No, so I'll
Yeah,
have
so
to.
we
I'm sure it'll
learned about
slip out
Robin.
if she really loves atomic war that much.
She
What
used
did
to
I
have
say?
posters on her wall of
In
her
my
favorite,
locker. No,
her
in my
favorite
locker.
atomic,
Hi.
or in her locker. Yeah, nuclear.
Her favorite
explosions.
movie, The Day After.
The day, I haven't even seen that one.
It's a made-for-TV movie, probably 1984 or 5, about nuclear war. It was actually very dark and disturbing when you're a kid watching that.
I mean, isn't everything about nuclear war disturbing? I don't know if I can think about a happy film or movie, video game or anything that's super happy related to the nuclear apocalypse.
It feels a little bit like Arrested Development. I don't know if you guys are we all here?
Yeah.
Do we all speak Arrested Development? Can I
Yes.
quote?
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
So the ethics teacher, when she talks about loving Saddam Hussein, and Michael Bluth is like, to study, right? She's like, yeah, to study.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I felt like last week. I'm like, yeah, I love atomic bomb, like to study them. Oh yeah, just to study.
Just to study.
Just to study 'em.
Yeah.
I just think
Okay,
that-
Joel, what
we
is
go.
a useless talent or skill that you have that you're proud of?
I mean, spouting off lots of information. That's the first thing that comes to mind. It can be useful.
What do you
but
mean?
just random things. I mean, like right now, what popped into my head is talking about the Hussite Wars. So I was reading about the Hussite Wars in the 15th century Holy Roman Empire in the Czech
You're right.
Republic,
This is
Hungary.
useless.
Yeah, totally useless. No, I mean, it can be useful, but out of context, what are you going to do with
It can
that?
be useful.
What are you gonna do
specifically
with
when
that?
you're in a debate about
When you're in a debate about the Holy Roman Empire.
the Holy Roman Empire or
I mean, what I was going for is, can you put your elbow on your nose or something like that? You know?
I can like shake my eye muscles. Can any of you guys do that?
Okay, go
Is
ahead.
it totally random? I don't know
In
that you're going
case
to be able
this
to see
turns
it
the
on my-
video.
I don't know if you're going to be able to
Get
see
in
it
there.
on
Yes.
Guys.
And you don't like horror movies, and
You
you're
know what
doing
you
this?
You look like the new Superman flying. And you
Doing
were in
his
front
little
of the-
thing.
Yeah,
The non-CGI'd
eyeballs
Superman.
that were crazy.
Yeah, I can really get it going if I can. I'm too close to the camera there, but
When
it
did
freaks
you
my
learn
kids
you had
out.
that skill, Joel? Was that something you knew as a kid, or did it develop later in life?
I figured it out because my dad. I have the ability to like move my scalp muscles, which a lot of
Let's
people
see
can
that.
do. But I'm wearing the head.
Thinking
set.
that
It's
you
hard
guys
to
going
do.
places. He's like, I have the ability to move, and I was going to think he was going to say move objects with.
I'm
just my
Professor
mind.
X from the X-Men. Like I can't. A lot of people, they can do the tongue roll thing. So when I was a kid, everybody would do things
There
like
it
that.
is.
And I don't know, at some point I figured this out as my skill. I could reply back, well, I can't do that, but I could do this, and equally gross
And
people
that's
out.
why he had.
No friends.
And that's why I had no friends. Yes.
I don't know. The eye jiggle guy should be very popular. That should be like
The eye jiggle guy.
Okay, I have one more. If your name wasn't your name and you had to choose a new one, what would it be? And I want each of you. And then I'm going to give you my name for you.
Okay, if my name wasn't Dan,
Yeah.
I don't really know. My name is so boring. I can't imagine having a name that was interesting. Like Mr. B. That's an interesting name. You got to explain that one. I don't know. Maybe my name should be Dylan, spelled Dylan, Dylan, because my email address uses a false spelling of my last name. And that gets really annoying when I'm trying to explain to people my email address, because it's actually messed up orders. It's messed up official documentation because people think that my last name is spelled different than it actually is. And so maybe I would just embrace that and actually people would actually be able to spell my name right.
Okay. Who's next?
I mean, I hated my name when I was a kid because it's a what's the word? A unisex name, Robin. And there was Kermit the Frog had a nephew. He's
Robin's
not
not really a unisex name in my opinion.
Robin Williams.
Robin
Yeah.
Hood.
You have Robin
Hood.
Hood, Robin Williams, and Batman and Robin. That's it. Those
Kermit
are
the Frog in the 80s had a nephew, and Kermit the Frog's nephew was Robin. There's a trivia bit for you. And for some reason, that frog was big in the news when I was like in elementary school. And so people would tease me and say I had a boy's name. But I've come to terms. I love my name and I wouldn't change it. I like having an odd spelling of my name. I have grown to appreciate my moniker. I am one of those women who legally kept and I'm not going to say my full legal name on the podcast, but on paper, I have my first name, middle name, maiden name, last name, as I only write my first and last name, like Garfield, which is my husband's last name. But I just didn't want to drop my maiden name or my middle name, which is Alicia, because I was named after my grandma. So
nice. Joel?
I really don't know, so I'm just going to go with my high school Spanish name, which was Magallanes, the Spanish name for Magellan, who circumnavigated the world.
got into fierce debates about the Roman Empire. And
okay, so I'm going to give you guys. I'm going to rename all of you, including myself, but I'm going to switch your gender because that's what we do here as well. So Robin,
that's what we do here.
You're
Robin,
on the wrong podcast.
Yeah, you're on the wrong podcast.
Sarcasm is thick here. Robin, you are Robin. Oh, that's what you already brought it up. There we go.
Robin.
Daniel, you are Danielle. Joel, you are Noel.
No, Joella is a real female name. I've known a few Joellas.
Okay, but I'm still going to call you Noel. And I am naming myself from Mr. B to Queen B.
Oh, there you go.
This is a very interesting segment, B.
I'm wondering where this is going.
I think on that note,
their names.
On that note, I think that Queen B, you have given us a nice little segue to kind of wrap things up for the week. I hope you guys had a fun time listening, and we will see you guys next week, hopefully on Thursday. We got a little bit delayed this week and are releasing this a little bit late, but maybe we'll have our first video up. We'll have to see how it goes, and then we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.
From dawn to dusk. Oh, which side are you on?